Week 13, Overview. Early Greeks, Cycladic, Minoan, Mycenaean, and Trojan cultures. We toured the world of Moses in our first unit, looking at Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Promised Land. We circled the globe over the last 3 weeks, visiting ancient India, China, and the Americas. This week, we're going to begin a study of the earliest Greek cultures, the Cycladic, Minoan, Mycenaean, and Trojan peoples. All these are known as Aegean cultures because they center on the island-studded Aegean Sea and the surrounding mainlands of modern-day Greece and Turkey. We'll be studying the Bronze Age in the Aegean, a time of great advances in architecture, painting, and crafts. There's no written history from this time, although there are some records on clay tablets. We know a lot about them, though, because their stories have been handed down from ancient times. We still have Homer's great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which provide us with a great deal of detail about life in the Greek Bronze Age. The Aegean Sea is bounded by Greece, Turkey, and various large and small islands. To make this audio easier to understand, I'll be referring to all the Bronze Age peoples in this area as Greek, even though there were 4 very distinct cultures. The earliest of these 4 cultures was called the Cycladic, which flourished on a number of islands in the Aegean Sea. The Cycladic people mostly lived by fishing. They grew grapes for wine and sailed around the Aegean to trade with other peoples. They designed pottery and carved distinctive stone figurines. After 1900 BC, however, the Cycladic culture declined. We'll spend most of our time discussing the Minoan, Mycenaean, and Trojan cultures, which came next. We'll be studying Greek mythology for the next 3 weeks, and Homer's epics for 5. In Tapestry of Grace, we use mythology to show the difference between man-made religions and what God has revealed. We ask our children questions that expose the man-centered heart of mythology. Once they know what to look for, the Bible seems more and more supernatural, not less and less, in comparison with mythology. Geography this week is well worth your time. Last week we covered all of North and South America. This week, all we need to cover is the Aegean Sea area around Greece. We'll be coming back to Greece repeatedly this year, though, so it's a good idea to learn the basics well now. Besides which, Greek geography is fun. The early Greek cultures were all seafaring people, and it's no wonder. If you like water, you'll love the Aegean Sea. The Greek peninsula sticks into it, a peninsula with deep bays and peninsulas of its own, so that no part of Greece is more than 85 miles from the sea, and much of it lies within sight of the water. The Greek mainland is just the beginning, though. The coast of Turkey wraps around the eastern Aegean. Between Turkey and Greece are many islands, large and small, which were settled by these seafaring peoples. Several of them were centers of Aegean culture thousands of years ago. The geography of the Aegean blends into its mythology. There's Troy, on the coast of Turkey, which the mainland Greeks besieged for 10 years because Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, had run away from her husband, the king of Sparta, to marry a prince of Troy. Troy was near the entrance to the Dardanelles, the waterway that leads from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. That's where the mythical hero Jason sailed his legendary ship, the Argo. Jason's crew, the Argonauts, reads like a who's who of ancient Greece. If you know Greek mythology at all, you'll recognize many of the names. There were about 50 of them, and they included the Boreads, sons of the north wind, Hercules, or Heracles as he was known in Greece, Orpheus, the musician who penetrated the underworld, and the twins, Castor and Pollux, who make up the constellation Gemini. They sailed out of the Mediterranean, where no Greek had gone before, to find the Golden Fleece. We've assigned readings on Jason for your younger children. You might want to read that story out loud. The mythology of the Aegean provided the clues that archaeologists used to unlock the secrets of the culture. The great epics of these people include explicit descriptions of geographic features. For example, Odysseus sailed his ship between Scylla and Charybdis, which are suspiciously similar to the Straits of Messina between Italy and Sicily. Jason sailed the Argo to the far side of what is obviously the Black Sea. The archaeological investigation of the Bronze Age cultures began when one man, Heinrich Schliemann, decided that the legends must contain some elements of history. The great epics of the Trojan War couldn't all be myth. He started looking for Troy, using the legends for a guide. In 1870, he found the ruins of the city. Other archaeologists started following up on other myths and discovered ruins that matched some details of those stories. The best example of this may be the Minoan culture on the island of Crete. According to the legends, King Minos of Crete conquered Athens, which had to send 7 maidens and 7 youths every 9 years for the Minotaur to eat. Now, this creature was half man and half bull, and lived in a labyrinth, designed by Daedalus, the world's greatest inventor. Things went along this way for a while, with the Minotaur eating young Athenians every 9 years, until Prince Theseus, son of King Aegeus of Athens, volunteered to be one of the sacrificial victims. He told his father he would kill the Minotaur, and promised that if he succeeded, he would change the black sails of mourning into white sails to signal his success. When Theseus got to Crete, King Minos' daughter Ariadne fell in love with him. She gave him a ball of thread to unwind as he went into the labyrinth. Theseus killed the monster and led the other Athenians back to safety. Theseus took Ariadne with him from Crete, but she never made it back to Athens with him, and Theseus forgot to change his black sails to white. King Aegeus was so overcome with grief that he flung himself from the cliff where he had waited and watched every day since his son departed in the ship. The sea's been called the Aegean Sea ever since. It turns out that the story of the Minotaur wasn't all fairy tale. In 1900, Sir Arthur Evans discovered a palace at Knossos in Crete with so many passageways that it resembles the legendary labyrinth. I doubt there was ever a Minotaur, but the Minoans did invent the dangerous sport of bull dancing. Paintings found at Knossos show bulls and bull-baiting games as a part of their worship. The Minoans laid some major foundations for later Greek civilizations. They traded with people as far away as Egypt. They developed a number system based on the number 10 and invented a form of writing known as Linear A. The Greeks on the mainland copied these inventions. The Minoan civilization was wiped out, though, after 1450 BC. Archaeologists have discovered that fire destroyed most of the towns and palaces on Crete. The palace at Knossos survived the conflagration, but another people, the Mycenaeans, took control of it. A few generations later, other Greeks burned that palace, and Minoan culture began to decline. There are no remaining traces of Minoan culture after the mid-1100s BC. The Mycenaean Greeks lived on the Greek mainland, on the Peloponnesian Peninsula near Sparta. Heinrich Schliemann, who discovered Troy, gets the credit for discovering them, too. After his dig at Troy, Schliemann went on to look for other Greek cultures. In 1876, he discovered royal graves at Mycenae. Nobody knows where these Mycenaeans came from, but scholars think they were the ancestors of today's Greeks. Civilization began there around 2000 BC, and the Mycenaean culture spread as far as Athens and Thebes. The Mycenaeans used Minoan architecture as a model for their palaces, and adopted their number system and their method of writing. By 1500 BC, the Mycenaeans had grown so powerful and influential that they dominated subsequent Greek culture. For some unknown reason, though, the Mycenaean culture collapsed sometime after 1200 BC. Some legends say the Mycenaeans were invaded by the Dorians, a people from northwestern Greece, but many experts doubt whether the Dorians showed up before the Mycenaean culture had already collapsed. The last of the four cultures we're discussing was the Trojan, which grew up in and around the city of Troy on the shores of modern Turkey. Since Heinrich Schliemann rediscovered it, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of 9 different cities on the site of Troy. Each successive city was built on the ruins of the one before it. The 7th city seems to be the one we read about in the Iliad and the Odyssey. This city was built during the early 1200s. It was set afire and destroyed in the mid-1200s BC. If there's any truth to the legends, Troy was conquered and burned by Mycenaean invaders from the mainland of Greece. Older students will be reading about the Trojan War over the next 5 weeks. The 2 great epics of Bronze Age Greece are the Iliad and the Odyssey. According to tradition, they were composed by the blind poet Homer. According to scholars, that was sometime around 800 BC, 4 centuries after the Great Wars. Now, according to the legend, it all began with Eris, the goddess of discord. She wrote, "For the most beautiful," on a golden apple, and then tossed it to the 3 most important goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. You may be more familiar with Aphrodite by her Latin name, Venus, the goddess of love. Each goddess claimed the apple, and the trouble began. They asked Paris, son of Priam, king of Troy, to decide between them. Each of the goddesses tried to bribe him to pick her. Paris gave the apple to Aphrodite, because her bribe was best. She promised him Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. The problem was that Helen was already married to King Menelaus of Sparta. Not only was she married to him, but all the kings of Greece had taken a vow to defend whoever won Helen's hand. That had been Odysseus' idea. It was the only way they could get her father, King Tyndareus, to allow anybody to court her. When Paris showed up at Sparta, Helen fell for him, even though she was married. She fled with him to Troy. Menelaus and his brother, Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, reminded the other kings of their oaths and organized an expedition to get Helen back. The army included every living hero, Achilles, Ajax, Odysseus, and so forth. But the war wasn't limited to human heroes. According to the Greeks, every major deity took sides as well. Poseidon, king of the sea, horses, and earthquakes, was Troy's chief defender. Athena was the champion of the Mycenaean Greeks. For 10 years the Greeks laid siege to Troy, but could not conquer it. The Iliad tells the story of how Achilles, their greatest warrior, threw a pity party because Agamemnon, the commander, had insulted him. The war went badly without Achilles, but he finally threw himself back into the battle after Hector, crown prince and hero of Troy, killed his friend Patroclus. Once he got back into the fight, he killed Hector. The poem ends with Hector's funeral. Neither the Iliad nor the Odyssey tells how the war was won. The Latin poet Virgil tells that tale in the Aeneid. Odysseus, the slyest of the Greeks, came up with a plan to build a wooden horse as an offering to Poseidon. The Greeks left the horse on the beach, got in their ships, and sailed away. The Trojans believed the Greeks had given up. What they didn't know was that the inside of the horse was packed with Greek warriors, and the ships that were sailing away all turned back to attack as soon as darkness fell. Prophetess Cassandra and Laocoon, priest of Poseidon, tried to warn the Trojans. Beware of Greeks, even bearing gifts. They ignored his warnings and brought the horse inside the walls. That night, death exploded from the belly of the horse. The Greeks took back Helen, killed most of the Trojans, and burned Troy. According to the Aeneid, the few Trojan survivors included the warrior Aeneas, whose descendants founded Rome. The Odyssey tells of the aftermath of the war. Wily Odysseus, king of the island of Ithaca, had offended Poseidon, and he vowed that he would not get home for 10 more years. As Odysseus labored year after year to get home, the people of Ithaca decided he must be dead. Every eligible bachelor camped out at his home to woo his wife and eat his food, while Penelope, his faithful wife, fended them off and waited for her husband Hero's safe return. I love the end of the Odyssey. It makes me think of the day Jesus will come back for his bride. Penelope believed in her husband, no matter how dark things looked or how long he had been gone. May the bride of Christ be just as faithful to her Lord. The Trojan War, by all accounts, took place sometime around 1200 BC. It wasn't long after that all the Bronze Age civilizations of the Aegeans vanished. Within a century of the war, the Greeks had lost their ability to read and write. They forgot how to build great structures. Most trade ended. The next 300 years were dark ages. All that was left behind were the stories of their heroes and their gods.